Peter, instead of taking a look at the actual documents themselves, the objects from over 400 years, we've digitized them, and Toppan Insatsu, a company here in Japan, has developed an application, an app, in order to actually view them, to make them enlarged, make them smaller, to look at the different explanations and so forth in them as well.
Yeah.
And this is what it looks like right here. I'm going to move along.
That's fun.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And for example, we have one frame here of the fans, this beautiful fan here, and if you turn on, push that button, you can see that there's a whole explanation in English and also in Japanese of the frame that you're actually looking at. That's one way to allow people to approach it.
Absolutely.
So to better and to share it and to understand it as well. This is a really interesting illustration here of two herons, perhaps crossing a bridge. Can you tell us what this is about?
Yes, okay. So I'll read it first, okay? Is that right? I'll read it in Japanese and
in the
English?
Japanese,
Yes,
very good.
yep. Kasasagi no wataseru hashi ni mokushimo no shiroki o mireba yozo fuki ni ikeru.
Well, Peter, that's really amazing. You've chanted it in the way that traditional Japanese poets and courtiers would actually read the poems themselves. And I notice as you chant the poem that it's very, very slow. You can hear one word at a time, and it's almost as if you're on a sort of jet stream taking you back 1,000 years.
Yes. Can I read the English version of this
Yes,
one
yes,
now?
please do.
How the night deepens, a ribbon of the whitest frost is stretched across the bridge of magpie wings. The lovers will cross.
Wow, that's a complete mixture of Japanese chanting rhythms together with the English that you've created, that you've in your translation. And it sounds very, very lyrical. In English as well, it captures, I think, some of the rhythms and the feelings that you get when you read it in Japanese as well.
Thank you, yeah. I try to always, I think the rhythm is the most important aspect of the translation, so I always try to convey the rhythm of the original in the English translation.
That's beautiful, yeah. The poem is about these magpies crossing over the Milky Way, creating a bridge of their wings for these two lovers who get together. If it's clear in the sky, only once a year. If it's cloudy, they're not able to cross and meet each other.
So it has two interpretations, as you know. One is that it's the lovers' secret bridge in the palace for the lovers to cross.
We can see a bridge here.
Yes,
right?
yes, a bridge, exactly, yeah. And then the other one is the Tanabata Matsuri. It's for the festival of the Milky Way, I think, in the 7th of July, isn't that right? And the two birds, and the two figures from the legend, can only meet once a year, and the magpies create a bridge with their wings, and they cross over that.
Yes.
So that we have both interpretations of that poem, which makes it it's really beautiful. It combines two very elegant words.
Right, and then there's also another level, another layer, is that in the Imperial Palace in Kyoto, this was written by Otomo no Yakamochi, who's an ancient poet from the Meiyoshu period. So in the 8th century, we know that there was a bridge, which was called the Bridge of Magpies, which is basically stairs going from the garden up into the residence where the women would live, and then the male nobles would visit and so forth as well. So the frost falling on the stairs themselves sort of indicates that there's someone wanting to go up and into the inner residences to meet his lover and to have a sort of secret meeting at night as well. So there's there's another sort of level as well. Not just the Chinese and the Japanese festival and the tale of these two mythical man and a woman trying to get across the wings of magpie bridge, but also the actual scene itself.
The scene itself,
in the court, which was kind of fascinating
it's
to me.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yes.
It's really beautiful. You know, this poem was included in the Hyakunishu, or the 100 Poets, One
Yes.
Poem Each, and I think it's a really good reflection of Fujiwara no Take's aesthetic, because it's a white on white image, and he thought that color was very beautiful.
Yes.
And we only find that one image in the poem, or in the collection. That's the only one color. So we can tell from that it was considered very beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. And it's also an example of the mitateru, or substituting one thing for another. So it's a really beautiful poem, I think.
Very, very, very beautiful. But when you put it together with this illustration, it gives you a very, very different impression. It's comical, it's almost a parody of this very, very almost sacrosanct, you know, sort of poem, very, very, very classical sort of poem. And it's also very kind of cute also in a way, in a sort of modern kawaii sort of way as well.
I think that's lovely actually, the way, my interpretation of the image is that this is a kind of a personification of the two lovers.
Yes.
Because they're quite large, and they're like the two lovers. So the illustration is actually reflecting both images in the poems, both interpretations of the poems, one as the winged bridge and the other of the two lovers. But what's so marvelous about this image is that it's created from a literary poem, because kasasagi is a magpie in English.
Which is small and black and white together,
exactly,
right?
black and white.
Very different from these.
Exactly,
birds.
and these are herons, right?
Herons, white herons.
So this is kasa, umbrella.
And we say
sagi,
sagi for herons.
For herons.
So kasasagi means magpie, and sagi means heron. So they're completely different birds, right?
Birds, right, of course, totally different. But by putting these two words together, kasa and
removing the kasa from kasasagi and turning it into an umbrella.
An umbrella, exactly. So it's kasa is the Japanese word for umbrella anyway. So we have sagi, the word for the heron, and we put the two together and we can make kasasagi, or magpie. So, of course, that comical aspect of it, it gives us a totally new way of looking at the original poem, I think, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And it leads you into the poem. It's a puzzle in a way, because this is the first half of the word of magpie, and this is the second half of it. But they're illustrations of actual concrete objects which are in the world, right? So you look at that and you think, am I supposed to divide, multiply, add?
Exactly, or associate.
Right, association. So here it's addition, right? The kasa together with the sagi, creating kasasagi, which means magpie. He says, oh, wait a minute, here's a bridge. So you're supposed to associate that with a very, very famous poem by
exactly.
Yakamochi.
So that was exactly the kind of play of the people in the Edo period. They would look at these images, and then they would say, ah, that's kasasagi.
Wow.
From the Hyakunishu, or from the 100 poems, or from the Manyoshu. So it's a game of association. But it's only really possible in Japanese because of the large number of homonyms that they have in the language. So we can't really make those kind of games in English. But because Japanese culture or language is so based on homonyms, and waka poetry is so based on homonyms, it's a literary pun visual image. So it's really classical Ogino Sōshi style.
And it's fascinating how you've captured that in your illustration itself. This poem itself, the poem and the fan itself taken together, there's in a sense, almost an imbalance, because the poem itself is very, very straightforward. It's the scene itself. Of course, it has references to ancient Chinese mythology and to Japanese, almost religious rituals, and also to the stairs that that existed in the imperial palace. So there are all these layers of meaning behind a very, very simple looking poem itself, but the illustration is comical, and it's dissected elements of it. So it's very, very sort of very sort of complicated in a way. I want to take a look at another poem, the next one right here, which is next to it right here. You see, these are perhaps mums, chrysanthemums, and autumnal grasses. It's a little difficult to look at, but there's a grasshopper.
The grasshopper.
Right here, right here. This poem is also, above it, related directly to the illustration. First of all, I'll read it.
Okay, sure.
草深き野辺にはすまで旗織の抜きが足らぬか海に来たるわ. And that's how you can, as you say it in the original Japanese. Can you give us your translation?
Dear grasshopper weaver, choosing not to be hemmed in by the deep grasses of the silken plain, do you loom before us because you ran out of thread and came to spin a yarn upon the sea.
It's amazing.
So I put a lot of the puns in the actual poem. So this, as you can tell, this is a poem full of puns and play and words and so on. So when I created the English translation, I used a lot of the associative words or puns in English as well. For example, hemmed in, silken plain, loom before us,
right.
Ran out of thread, and spin a yarn upon the sea.
It's amazing. Almost every line, has something to do with textiles or weaving or something like that. That's you've overloaded as a translation. You've probably perhaps passed over the line where we say it's a correct, transparent translation into something that's almost interpretive.
Oh yes.
And you did that in order to allow us to have a sort of a feeling, the same sort of lightness and sort of comical sort of sense of humor that perhaps contemporary readers got as well. That's a really fascinating attempt.
I always attempt to be extremely faithful to the original, but I thought this was a good case, an exceptional case, where I could show the playfulness of the world of this world here, and I added additional puns, which are always normally so difficult to translate into English, and oftentimes I can't translate them all. But here it was like a little feast. And I thought, this is a great chance, and I'm sure that the director of the Institute would forgive one infidelity for the sake of showing a greater lesson.
It's really beautiful. For example, in the original Japanese, umi ni kitaru wa, is that why you came to the ocean, to the sea? It's very, very simple. And you've turned it into looming over us, right? Which is something that's very, very big. But also, I remember being very, very young and seeing, as a child, seeing a grasshopper up close. And it really looked,
that's right,
sort of threatening almost in a way. It was really sort of looming over you. So you use that as a pun to refer to the fact that the grasshopper itself was used as a metaphor, or was described as being a weaver itself, right? And it's all filled with the grasshopper as a weaver.
Exactly. Yes.
That's really, really,
and then
really
choosing not to be hemmed in.
Right.
That's the two meanings, right?
Yes.
But the hem, and then not to be caught
enclosed.
So you came to the wide sea instead, and crossing the silken plain to loom before us. And then you ran out of thread.
Yes.
And spinning a yarn, that's a double pun, of course, as well, because it's weaving but also telling a tale, which is what the poem is doing, right? So it's a very free interpretation, but I think it illustrates very well the joy and the pleasures of this great world. And one of the nice things about the English translations is that through them and through this application here, we'll be able to find a new way to disseminate this world.
Exactly. It's fascinating because, for example, just that, if you push on that, you can see all of the things. You can see it up close, the picture itself. It's moving here.
Right, very nice.
We've made some they've made some sort of animation. The grasshoppers, they're actually moving.
Good.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, it's lovely. And then the English comes up.
And the English comes up in the Japanese as well.
Lovely.
So there are lots of very, very sort of intuitive ways that you can sort of get closer to it as well, which is fascinating. Peter, something about the poem itself and the way that it progresses and so forth, and the way that it looks, is fascinating to me because it's actually the ocean itself. The protagonist, the poet himself or herself, is actually in the ocean, on a boat perhaps, or on the shore. And there aren't very many Japanese classical poems that actually show you the seaside. Often Japanese nature in poetry is referred to as secondary nature, something which has been created and assumed and imagined and so forth. And this is actually sort of raw nature, sort of almost in a Western sort of sense. That was sort of fascinating to me. What do you think? What did you think about that?
Yeah, well, what to me, I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. In contrast to the Kasasagi, or the previous poem, where the picture is so beautiful, in this poem the image is very simple, but the story is fantastic. So in this poem we enjoy the pleasure of the words and the tales and the fun of making games with words, whereas in the other one it's the picture that gives us the kind of pleasure. So we can tell from this that the world of these fans' paintings are very broad. It's both linguistics and visual, and so it's a very kind of wonderful pleasure that they give to us, I think.